Racism in the justice system prevents two young lovers from being together. I discuss this and more on today's episode. Welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I've found in my travels. Today, I want to talk about a book that I read, one that was on my 2025 TBR. Today's book is all about racism in the justice system and love and things like that. I am referring to If Beale Street Could Talk by James Baldwin, which was published in 1974. For those who don't know, James Baldwin was a writer who lived in the 1900s, 1930-something to the 1980s. He wrote a number of books, including If Beale Street Could Talk and Go Tell It on the Mountain, as well as a number of other books. And then he also wrote a number of essays. These essays ranged from the topic of writing to the topic of civil rights to issues for Black Americans and things like that. And he's very well regarded for his work, giving a number of interviews as well, talking about civil rights in the wake of Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, those people, he's become like a big name in that sort of area, and his work has won a number of awards too. This book is particularly good. I'm definitely going to recommend it. But other than that, there's not much else to say about James Baldwin except he was a gay man, which not a lot of people talk about. They primarily talk about the fact that he was Black and that he stood up for civil rights and was very anti-capitalist as well. But then very few people talk about the fact that he was gay, and sometimes that shows up in his writing as well. Definitely going to recommend this. I had a good time with this, and I'll talk more about that in the analysis section. But without further ado, let's talk about If Beale Street Could Talk. I will do a summary, a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So If Beale Street Could Talk is sort of told out of sequence, flashing back and forward, but it primarily focuses on Tish, a young Black girl who is living with her family before she will move in with her boyfriend, fiance, husband, and she is in love with this man named Fonny. That's not their real names, it's just what their families call them. And at the beginning of the book, we find out that Tish is pregnant with Fonny's child. Unfortunately, Fonny is in jail. He's being unjustly accused of a crime that he says he didn't commit, and it's not really up in the air whether or not that's true. It really seems like he did not commit the crime. And Fonny asks if Tish is going to keep the child, to which she says yes, and he's happy about it, but also he realizes that if he stays in jail or gets sentenced or gets found guilty for this crime, he won't be able to raise the child with her. But she notes that she'll always have their family to sort of fall back on there. Tish and Fonny's backstory is highlighted upon how they grew up together. They initially fought one another, but they quickly became like brother and sister, grew really close together, Fonny was really considered a member of Tish's family. They really loved him, but Fonny's family was a bit more conflict-oriented. His mother and father don't really seem to like each other, and Fonny's father seems abusive towards his mother. And Fonny's sisters don't really seem to like Fonny, and they don't really seem to like Tish because she seems to be like a terrible influence on him or something like that. When Tish gets home from the jail, she tells her family, and they're supportive, even though they're sad about what's happening to Fonny. And they say that they'll be there for her. And then they invite Fonny's family over, and they tell them, but Fonny's mother isn't really supportive. She believes that Tish is going to be the ruin of Fonny, and she hopes that the baby dies or something like that, which is kind of harsh to say to your someone who's going to be your daughter-in-law, but someone who's also carrying your grandchild. Although it should be noted that Frank, I believe, who's Fonny's father, is supportive of Tish and wants to help them make it to a better place. And then a couple days later, they go and talk to their lawyer. Their lawyer is a young white man, sort of starting out, who's decided to take on the case at the behest of Tish's sister. And the police notes, or the lawyer notes, that there's a little bit of police intimidation going on. Fonny's friend Daniel can provide a sort of alibi, but the police are beating him up to get him to testify against Fonny. And they also are intimidating the woman who was raped, and saying that they're saying that she was coerced into giving a statement about Fonny, and they're not actually bothering to look for the real rapist, which is probably the case for police sometimes. But they also sent her back to Puerto Rico so she can be in peace and away from everything, which I think is just has something to do with them trying to silence her so she can't reveal the truth or anything like that. And Tish recalls, hanging out with Daniel, Fonny's friend, and Daniel sharing his story of going to jail, being unfairly targeted by the police, and being sexually abused in prison, and how that has changed Daniel, and Tish worries that might happen to Fonny as well. Joseph, who is Tish's father, and Frank begin stealing from their jobs. The family kind of suspects it, but they don't say anything because they don't want to be accomplices, and they need that money to pay for the lawyer, as well as other essential things for Tish and the upcoming child. Tish's mother, Sharon, is tasked with traveling to Puerto Rico to find Victoria, the woman who was raped. She manages to speak to her boyfriend, Pietro, who doesn't want her to be involved in any of this, but eventually, through the help of some locals, Sharon is able to find Victoria. And she tries to convince Victoria that she's being lied to by the police and that she can't sentence a good black man to jail. But Victoria is kind of fraught and mentally not doing well at this time, and so she just burst out crying, and they have to take her to the sort of wilderness of Puerto Rico to get away from everything. And as a result, the trial is delayed at that point. But meanwhile, Tish is getting more pregnant, and she remembers the officer who is accusing Fonny of doing the crime, Officer Bell. At one point, she had to protect Fonny from him, and he regularly looks at her with eyes that suggest a great evil within him, and that he wants to potentially rape Tish or something like that. And he just has a vendetta against Fonny because Fonny seems to be doing well, and he can't abide a black man doing well in this racist world. And then, as I mentioned, the trial is delayed, which upsets Fonny because he's gonna have to remain in jail until the trial. Although they are trying to scrounge up some money for bail, but things aren't really looking good at this point. Tish receives a call where one of Fonny's sisters says that her father, Frank, hasn't come home, and eventually they discover that Frank is in the wilderness somewhere in his car. Now, whether that means that he's dead in his car or if he's just sitting there unable to do anything after being fired from his job, that remains to be seen. It's not exactly clear as the story reaches its end there. But again, as the story comes to a close, presumably Tish realizes that it's time, which I think it means that she's going to give birth. And in the last couple lines of the book, Tish notes that the baby, she has a vision of the baby crying as if to wake up the dead. And we don't quite find out what Fonny's fate is. In terms of analysis, there is a lot to talk about with this book. James Baldwin creates pretty much a masterpiece here of exploring, racial injustice, love, family, micro moments, and things like that. But the first thing that's worth mentioning is what does the title mean? Because as I was reading it, I was like, well, what is Beale Street? And because there's no Beale Street mentioned in the story, and I had to look it up, and it's in reference to Beale Street, Memphis, which is a street in Music Town where you primarily see soul music, jazz, blues, things things like that. So it's a street that's sort of historical for Black individuals. And so what I think James Baldwin is saying with this title is like, if Beale Street could talk, this is what you would hear. This is the culture of Black individuals. It's sort of encapsulating like the struggle in this story. And I think Baldwin does a really good job of capturing that struggle, which I'll talk more about in a few moments. But one of the main themes that Baldwin is talking about here is that of an unjust system. Baldwin straight up says many times in this story that Fonny is being targeted because of his race, that there's no evidence that he committed a crime, that because he is a Black man in America, he is being targeted because it's easy to oppress Black men, and this Black man seems to be doing pretty well for himself, and America can't abide by that, so he's going to be targeted and sent to jail and put in his place. And yeah, that's exactly how the justice system is in America. It is a fact. There's no argument really to be made against it. Like anyone out there who's like, oh, but that's not true, that's woke nonsense or anything like that. No, it's a fact of the system that we've been seeing for years upon years upon years, of Black men being targeted by police officers, Black men and Black women too being given unfair sentences in the justice system, being unfairly targeted for crimes that white individuals are not targeted for, or not like arrested for in equal numbers. And you can see that with a lot of what's been happening in the past 10 to 11 years, really in modern sense, beginning or probably preceding this, but in my eyes beginning with the protest in Ferguson, Missouri, after police violence happened. And, it continues even to this present day. 2020 had the George Floyd protest. Los Angeles had the Rodney King police violence protest. And it just keeps continuing and continuing and continuing. And Baldwin is really capturing that in this story, showing that, a lot of this is happening because of those racial injustices. This doesn't feel out of place with how America actually is. And as a result of these injustices, the family doesn't really think much of the justice system. They hate interacting with it at any chance they get. The family hates cops. Fonny in particular hates cops. They're referred to as pigs in this story. The family doesn't like interacting with them. They don't like interacting with the legal system. They don't like judges. They don't like the lawyer that they're paired up with. They feel that he's going to try to cheat Fonny or them at any point, that he's going to feel like this is a lost cause and just sort of give up on it. And it's probably because they've seen that happen with so many other lawyers, with so many other parts of the legal system. And you can also see this sort of happening with the intimidation of witnesses. The police, the legal system has already sort of found their man. And so now they're just, beating up Daniel, for example, which I feel might actually happen. The police do have a habit of coercing witnesses. They're sending this Puerto Rican woman back to Puerto Rico because they don't want her revealing the actual truth, that maybe she got it wrong. They're just going to stick to her story or something like that. I feel like Officer Bell, the guy who's pretty much targeting Fonny in this story, isn't representative of the pure hatred of America to Black men. Tish notes that when she looks into Bell's eyes, she sees a coldness, a pure hatred, a desire to get rid of Black individuals. And when Tish stands up for Fonny, and when Fonny is able to sort of get out of being held accountable for doing some violence on the street to protect Tish, Bell can't abide by that, because again, a Black man has sort of got off, and that Black man is uppity, as racist people would say, and needs to be held accountable for that. What Baldwin is also suggesting here is that the only thing waiting for Black folks is an early death, that there's no hope in this system, that you raise your Black children as well as you can, and hopefully they might succeed, but realistically what's going to happen is someone's going to target them. Some part of the system is going to grab onto them and do further oppression. Allow me to read you an interesting quote from this. Fonny had found something that he could do, that he wanted to do, and this saved him from the death that was waiting to overtake the children of our age. Though the death took many forms, though people died early in many different ways, the death itself was very simple, and the cause was simple too, as simple as a plague. The kids had been told that they weren't worth shit, and everything they saw around them proved it. They struggled, but they fell like flies, and they congregated on the garbage heaps of their lives like flies. And that is a very harsh, very sad passage from this story. Fonny sort of getting around that through his art, which he really loves. As the narrator would suggest, or as Tish would, because Tish is kind of the narrator, the only thing that's really waiting is that death. And you can try to escape it, as I think James Baldwin is suggesting here. But there's because there are a few opportunities for you, because the system is so against you, maybe that's inevitable. Maybe this was always going to come for Fonny regardless of what he did. And I think for Baldwin, this is kind of personal, because he was a part of the civil rights movement. He met with political leaders, and he, I'm sure he marched and got an opportunity to talk to MLK and other such people. And so he saw firsthand of how the system targeted these black men, these men who were righteous in their causes, and unfairly killed them or jailed them, and in some cases, or because MLK was jailed and killed. He saw that with MLK, and he saw how it kind of seemed inevitable. So this is Baldwin just straight up pointing out the inequalities that exist, and how the oppressive system wants black men, black individuals dead, and there doesn't seem to be a lot that you can do besides forming community, which I'll get to in a moment. Baldwin also talks about the value of family, the value of community, as I had just noted. Baldwin highlights how crucial family is for Tish and Fonny in this story. They love their family. It makes them happy. They have their frustrations. Tish notes that she frequently fights with their family, with Fonny's family, but she inherently loves them, that they're a part of her lives, an essential part of their lives. But for Fonny, family might be the only thing keeping him going, especially after he ends up in jail. He says to Tish, knowing that you're with my child is the only thing that I have keeping me going, that wants me to get out of here, that prevents me from giving up. And he also says, knowing that there are people behind you, like my family and your family, who are supporting you, is good. It's what I need to do to have in order to know that you're doing well, and that, so that I know that it's worth getting out of here. And again, what Baldwin is essentially saying is there needs to be community support, and not only against this racism, but also against poverty. He was a socialist, so you see a little bit of socialism in his writing here, noting that it's important for people to stick together, because if they don't, the system can pick you off one by one, and it's harder to do so when you're all united. The fathers in this story seem to go to huge lengths to prevent Fonny from ending up in jail, to prevent Tish from ending up alone with nothing. They specifically steal from their jobs, and there's a very interesting passage that I would like to read to you about that. Joseph is coldly, systematically stealing from the docks, and Frank is stealing from the garment center, and they sell the hot goods in Harlem or in Brooklyn. They don't tell us this, but we know it. They don't tell us because if things go wrong, we can't be accused of being accomplices. We cannot penetrate their silence. We must not try. Each of these men would gladly go to jail, blow away a pig, or blow up a city to save their progeny from the jaws of this democratic hell, which is a good passage, especially the final bit about saving your progeny from the jaws of this democratic hell. It's very clear these fathers, care about their children. Family is very important to them. The family knows that that's important as well, and so they don't even bother asking about it. They know it's happening, but they don't say anything to prevent prevent discovery, to prevent further implication of whatever crimes must happen. You could argue that if stealing to help people like this, it's not bad, and I don't think it's bad. I don't think stealing to get food for your poor family is bad, even though some people are very blanket with their application of the laws. People might argue that I'm a bad person for saying such things, but I don't really care. The opinion of those people doesn't matter to me, and it doesn't appear to matter to James Baldwin as well, which is important. And again, I think what Baldwin is saying here is that people who are targeted need to have tight bonds, because again, one person alone is easily targeted. Many people are hard to sort of eliminate. It's hard to sort of undermine their shared cause. In that way, recently in the Super Bowl, there was a section of Kendrick Lamar's performance where Samuel L. Jackson, as Uncle Sam, says, "Scorekeeper, deduct one life." When there's a time of tight-knit community and among minorities, often the white man, those in power, will target a specific individual to deduct one life and take away that sort of unity, if at all possible. And that seems to be what's happening here. Fonny's not a particularly notable person in the community, but because Fonny is doing well, and not seeming to struggle like Officer Bell or many others might want him to, you have to deduct one life in that case. I think Sharon kind of acknowledges that. Tish's mother, Sharon, when she talks to Victoria, she goes to Puerto Rico and she says to Victoria, "You're putting away an innocent black man," and she's like, I think appealing to the fact that Victoria is also a minority woman. She's a Puerto Rican woman, which can't be easy. And she specifically says, "Why did you leave New York City?" And Victoria refuses to answer that. And I think what Baldwin is getting at there is that Victoria is experiencing a lot of the same issues that Black Americans are experiencing in Puerto Rico, and in New York, like in America. And so she's going back to Puerto Rico to kind of avoid all of that. And so deep down, Victoria must know that she made the wrong choice when she accused Fonny of being her rapist. But it's hard for her to do that, because she knows that if it's not Fonny who's going to jail, who's going to go to jail? Who's going to be held accountable? Because the police don't seem to be doing their job. Maybe Baldwin's not going that far, but I do think that argument is to be made there, that there's a lot going on in Victoria's mind as Sharon tries to persuade her and be in forming some unity there. Another fascinating aspect of this story is micromoments, something that I think I'm actually making up, but I've noticed it a couple times, and I want to talk about it. Baldwin is really good at writing the nuances of social interactions, and essentially when I say micromoments, what I'm saying is that Tish notices things in people, and there are brief moments between the conversation where Tish stops to see something in someone's face as she's talking with them. It's something that I don't see in a lot of stories, or if it's there, it's not written as well. You see this a couple times throughout the story. Tish tells her parents about the baby and the sort of reaction that she sees in her parents as she's getting ready to tell them, how they might already suspect, and their reactions after telling them. It reveals a lot about her parents. And when she holds hands with Fonny for the first time during church, sort of their realization of their love for one another, some unspoken things about that, and maybe what Fonny might see in himself and what they could mean to one another. It's all sort of written out on the page in a way that Tish is sort of gleaning from this interaction. But a really good moment is the moment in the story where Fonny beats up an Italian man for accosting Tish at a farmer's market or something like that. Specifically, Fonny attacks this Italian man, and then a police officer, Officer Bell, comes over, and Tish puts herself between the officer, and she looks at the officer and sees what he's thinking in that moment. She knows what Fonny's thinking, and then an Italian woman steps in, and there's a moment where Tish looks in her eyes and realizes what this woman is doing. She sees in the Italian woman that the woman knows what's going to happen to Fonny, if she doesn't step in and defend him for what he did to the Italian man. And then like Officer Bell and the pure racism and hate that he feels for black people, it comes off in that moment. And then like Tish standing in front of Fonny, not letting him sort of put himself in harm's way, and how he reacts to that, and how he doesn't like that at all, because he believes it's his job to defend her. And she's like, "Won't you let me kind of fight for you?" And he's like, "That doesn't really make me comfortable." But there's a lot there in that story, specifically unknown social histories. Like we mostly know what Tish is thinking in her history. We know a little bit about what Tish has told us about these other characters, but there's so much that we don't know, that James Baldwin is saying that there's so much underneath it all, sort of like an unknown social history, but an unknown or maybe a known history, like the entirety of black history and immigrant history and police history, white history, all layered in these interactions that you can't parse away. I also think there's an emphasis on empathy here, because a lot of what Tish is doing is sort of getting in the mind of others, sort of being in their position, what are they thinking, and how it's very necessary to feel that empathy at times, and maybe it can help us in our social interactions. I really like how James Baldwin is writing these micro moments here. It made this story of real joy. I think it's probably my favorite moment or favorite bit of this story, the way that he writes these micro moments, the way that he's sort of writing these interactions that take place between the conversation that take place between the events of the story. There's other great things about this story. The use of supportive black men, which you don't typically see in media, specifically like in movies, TV shows, books, and whatnot. Like black men are often viewed as aggressors, like pimp type characters. They smack black women. They don't show love. But here, Fonny shows love. Their parents, especially their dads, show love. It's a very necessary kind of portrayal, because you have all these other messages saying that black men are evil or harsh or terrible, and that they don't deserve love or they don't deserve leniency ever, and they should just be thrown in jail, which is what the predominant, white media is portraying these men as. It's something that I saw quite a bit living in Iowa, where the message is that black individuals can't take care of themselves because they're too busy rioting and whatnot. But if you actually go to these places where black people live, you see quite a different story, and it's great to see that sort of represented here. I think the writing can be very great, Baldwin's writing in particular, and at times he's writing really tense moments, especially like when Tish tells her parents, and then Fonny's parents, like the interaction is pretty tense in that moment, especially the anger that Fonny's mother feels for Tish, because she feels that she's somewhat responsible for what has happened to him, even though that's not really fair of her to say. But it's a very tense moment, and again, encapsulating histories that I mentioned before, the unspoken histories, the entirety of black history is kind of like layered in this story. I love that it's a love story, essentially, just in the context of the unjust American legal system. It's a pretty fascinating way to write this story. I also like how Baldwin kind of leaves it up to the reader to kind of guess what might happen to Fonny. Does he manage to overcome the odds of the legal system, or is he just another statistic of a black man who is unfairly accused of a crime, not given a great trial, and just sentenced and no longer able to be with his wife or potential wife and child? If you say that against all odds he manages to get free, I think an important thing to acknowledge in that moment is you're saying against all odds. The only way that Fonny is going to get off is through a miracle. And if somebody changes their story, or if the lawyer is able to prove that the police did not do their job as best as they could, and even if you're able to prove that, that doesn't always necessarily mean that your client gets off, because the legal system is often biased in favor of police officers and biased against black men. So, it takes a miracle. And I think that's what Baldwin is kind of leaving out in the open there. it's against all odds. The people like Fonny, even if they are innocent, they do not get off. They do not get fair trials or anything like that. It's unfortunate. It wrenches my heart as we come to the close of the story, because I want there to be a happy ending. Tish and Fonny love each other. It's a very beautiful love, but it is unfortunately a tragic love. I don't have much bad to say about this story. This is a really good story. I think the one issue is that maybe it could be longer. I maybe flesh out the trial, flesh out the outcome, maybe tell us what happens. Maybe that would be good, but I don't have many problems with like where it ends. Like it's as long as it needs to be, because Baldwin has determined that it needs to be that long, and there's not much arguing with that. I can't argue with the writing, because the writing's good. There's very little to kind of pick apart from this, so it's kind of a perfect story in my opinion. Maybe the sort of structure of flashing back and forward doesn't quite work out the way Baldwin is hoping for, but especially because some things are repeated, but it doesn't drag down the story. It's just a minor issue there. Anyway, those are my thoughts on If Beale Street Could Talk by James Baldwin. It is a high quality book, one that is definitely worth reading. So go out, buy it. It's probably worth buying. I'll probably buy a copy myself. I bought it on my Kindle, but I'd like to have a physical copy. You could also probably find it at your local library. Don't forget to patronize your local libraries. They have high quality reads such as this. If you have any thoughts on it, let me know in the comments below. I would love to have a discussion with you about this, especially if you have anything to say about my review. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about James Baldwin if they don't know about him already, and this book if they don't know about that. Otherwise, join the Discord if you want to have further conversations about books, movies, TV, race, and social justice issues, things like that. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and racism fighting travels. Farewell.